Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're cracking open the stack of sources you sent us, looking for the crucial nuggets that define policy, sustainability, and consciousness this week. Our mission is to find where practical necessity clashes with long-term ideals, from financial safety nets being tightened to diplomatic lines being redrawn, and even how our new infrastructure tries to balance experience with function.
It's definitely a dive into pragmatism today, and we're starting right away with some high-stakes financial policy. The Employees Provident Fund Organization, the EPFO, recently announced new rules for partial PF withdrawals. The Central Board of Trustees, or CBT, they claim this will enhance the ease of living for subscribers.
Okay, let's set the stage on the EPFO quickly. For context, your PF, it's got two main pots, right? There's your savings, the employee share, and then what your company puts in, the employer share. So what did the CBT actually do to streamline things, make it genuinely easier?
Well, they certainly cleaned up the structure a bit. They merged 13 previously quite complex withdrawal provisions into just a single streamlined rule. It's now categorized simply under essential needs, housing, and special circumstances. So that's simpler.
Right.
And a huge positive change, really, is that members can now actually draw from the employer contribution pot for the first time, not just their own savings.
Ah, that's significant.
It is. Plus, the waiting period for big life events, like getting married or buying a house, that's been cut down quite a lot, often from, say, 5 or even 7 years down to just 1 year. That really does help with needing cash sooner.
That sounds genuinely helpful, actually, especially, for younger workers maybe starting out.
Mm-hmm.
But as always seems to happen when the government touches mandatory savings, this ease of living idea seems to have run into some friction. What are the sticking points, the bits causing the backlash?
Yeah, there are two key restrictive provisions that drew the most fire, really. First, there's this new rule requiring that 25% of all your contributions must be kept as a minimum balance at all times. Even if you're eligible to withdraw more, you just can't touch that last quarter.
25%. Locked away.
Locked away. And second, if you lose your job and want what's called a premature final settlement, well, the rules have changed quite dramatically there. You can get 75% pretty much right away, but to get the full 100% PF withdrawal, you now have to prove you've been unemployed for 12 months. That's up from just 2 months previously.
12 months? Wow, that's a long time to wait if you're out of work. So the government's argument is probably about, ensuring there's a decent retirement pot at the end?
Yeah.
Letting the money grow through compounding?
Exactly. That's the official line. Ensures continuity, builds a better final settlement, accumulates a higher retirement corpus.
But where does the opposition stand?
No.
The unions?
Well, they were pretty unified. Trade unions, opposition MPs, they called the rule draconian, basically. Their core argument is simple. This policy effectively punishes people who've lost their jobs by forcing them to survive much longer without access to their own savings.
Mm-hmm.
And the All India Trade Union Congress, they came out with a really devastating statistic. They said 87% of EPFO members have less than 1 lakh rupees saved. Half have less than 20,000.
Goodness. That puts the 25% minimum balance rule in a very different light.
It absolutely does. For these low-wage earners, the argument is that holding back that mandatory 25%, well, the unions use the phrase preying on the weak. It's a really clear conflict, isn't it? The government's planning for retirement maybe decades away, but the unions are fighting for cash that people might need for survival, like today.
Right.
Even the former employer representative on the CBT, K.E. Raghunathan, he warned this risks dismantling the safety net for the most vulnerable people.
It really is that classic trade-off.
Yeah.
Long-term financial prudence versus immediate, sometimes desperate, short-term necessity. And it seems to be playing out on the backs of the poorest workers here.
Indeed. A difficult balance.
Okay, let's shift focus now from financial necessity to geopolitical necessity. We're looking at this fascinating and perhaps surprising diplomatic shift between India and the Taliban. The warm reception and protocol recently extended to the Taliban's acting foreign minister, Amir Khan Muttaqi. It signals a really profound change, though it's officially framed as an outreach to the people of Afghanistan.
Yeah, the path to this meeting was highly complex, and it really shows just how serious New Delhi seems to be about this engagement now. The whole process started back in January, actually. Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri had the first contact in Dubai. Then External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar had a phone call with Muttaqi back in May.
Okay, so groundwork was being laid.
Definitely. But the visit itself, the one in October, that was what you might call procedural dynamite.
Procedural dynamite. Wow.
Because Mr. Muttaqi himself, he's on the UN Security Council's consolidated sanctions list. He's a designated individual.
Right, so you can't just travel freely.
Exactly. For him to travel internationally, India had to formally request a sanctions waiver from the UN Security Council Committee. And that request was initially denied, which signals, significant international reluctance. But India didn't give up. They made a repeat request about a month later, and this time it was granted. That paved the way for the talks.
So securing that waiver alone shows a huge diplomatic effort and investment by India.
A very significant diplomatic investment, yes.
And these weren't just symbolic talks, were they? They seem to have yielded some concrete results.
They did. India announced plans to upgrade its technical mission in Kabul to a full embassy. That signals a more long-term commitment, doesn't it?
It certainly suggests that.
Plus, there were humanitarian pledges, things like 20 ambulances, promises of more infrastructure aid, that sort of thing.
And what about the other side? What did the Afghan delegation offer?
Well, the Afghan side reciprocated in areas that are really vital to India's security interests. They joined India in condemning terrorism, which is standard language, but crucially, they committed not to allow Afghan soil to be used by groups considered inimical to India.
That sounds like it directly addresses India's long-standing concerns about groups like Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba.
Precisely. There have been UN reports detailing the presence of camps for exactly those groups in eastern Afghanistan. So getting that commitment, on paper at least, is a major security assurance for New Delhi.
So let's get to the real driver here. Is this just purely pragmatic diplomacy? India securing its interests, maybe aligning with the enemy's enemy, especially since this visit happened around the same time Pakistan was launching airstrikes against Kabul over TTP attacks.
That's absolutely a driving factor, you're right. But I think it's part of a bigger picture, a global pattern, really. India has significant investments in Afghanistan. Estimates are around $3 billion over the past 2 decades. It needs to secure those.
Makes sense.
And it also seems to recognize that the Taliban regime, whether we like it or not, is stable and looks like it's here to stay. Look around the region. Russia has already formally recognized the regime. Other powers like China and Iran have functioning Taliban embassies. New Delhi probably feels it can't afford to lose influence or be left out in such a volatile, critical region.
Okay, but what's really striking, and it's mentioned in the sources, is the complete silence on the restrictions imposed on Afghan women. Prohibiting education, work, access to public spaces. Neither the Indian opening remarks nor the joint statement even mention them. Does that silence risk undermining India's own stated democratic values? Or is that just the grim cost of doing business in this situation?
That silence is very loud, isn't it? It strongly suggests that, for now at least, stability and securing regional influence are the absolute top priorities for New Delhi. It looks like a pragmatic calculation is being made. That internal matters, even ones as severe as these human rights violations against women and girls, won't stand in the way of diplomatic engagement.
So does this mean formal recognition is next?
It certainly raises that distinct possibility that India might be preparing to formally recognize the Taliban government, which would mean breaking ranks with the UN consensus and most Western countries.
A very heavy diplomatic gamble indeed. And apparently there's still conflict at the Afghan embassy here in Delhi, which remains loyal to the previous government.
Yes, that's another layer of complexity. The staff there are reportedly quite fearful about India's decision to upgrade its mission in Kabul. It puts them in a very precarious position.
Okay, complex situation to watch. Let's transition now to our environment segment. We're focusing on a new Status of Elephants in India report from the Wildlife Institute of India, the WII. The new estimate puts the total elephant count at 22,446. Which seems like quite a steep drop from the 2017 figure, which is nearly 30,000.
Right, but we have to immediately issue a really significant cautionary note here. The WII itself advises strongly against a direct comparison between these two numbers.
Why is that?
Because the apparent drop over 7,500 elephants in about 8 years is very likely due to an entirely new and hopefully much more reliable census method being used this time.
Okay, let's unpack this new methodology then. What is SAE 2021-25?
SAE stands for Synchronous All India Elephant Estimation, and the crucial difference is that it's a DNA-based method. Previous counts, they used often inconsistent methods like direct visual sightings or sometimes quite crude dung counts, which varied a lot between states and over time.
Right, hard to standardize.
Exactly. SAE involved dividing the entire country into unique 4 square kilometer grids. Enumerators then went out and collected over 21,000 elephant dung samples from these grits. These samples are then DNA analyzed. That allows for a much more scientifically robust estimate of the population size, identifying individuals and avoiding double counting.
So it's about precision.
It's about precision and consistency. The WII considers this the new monitoring baseline. It's designed for long-term reliability, something we can actually compare apples to apples with in the future.
Okay, so the focus should be less on that apparent drop number and more on establishing this scientifically sound baseline for the future. Understood. So where are India's elephants concentrated, according to this new baseline?
The Western Ghats landscape that covers Karnataka, Kerala, and Tamil Nadu, that's really the heartland. It holds over 53% of the total estimated population. That's about 11,934 elephants.
53%, that's huge.
It is. And within that, Karnataka leads the charge with just over 6,000 elephants estimated. The second largest habitat area is the northeastern hills and the Brahmaputra floodplains, holding just over 22% of the elephants.
Okay. Now, beyond just the numbers, what did the study identify as the most alarming long-term threat facing these populations?
Fragmentation. Habitat fragmentation is the big crisis highlighted. It's being driven primarily by expanding commercial plantations, things like coffee and tea estates, alongside mining activities, and also increasingly aggressive fencing, which blocks traditional movement corridors.
And the consequence of this fragmentation?
The tragic consequence is that elephants are being forced out of their traditional habitats and are venturing into areas where humans haven't seen elephants for perhaps 200 years.
Wow. 2 centuries is a long time. Those communities would have no memory.
Exactly. They lack any cultural memory, any historical context, or traditional knowledge for coexistence with elephants.
Which inevitably leads to conflict.
Severe human-elephant conflict. The result is really alarming figures, especially in some critical habitats like Tamil Nadu's Nilgiris and Coimbatore districts. The report mentions these areas have already seen 150 human deaths and 170 elephant deaths attributed to conflict.
That's devastating.
It is. And the key takeaway from the report on this front is really stark. Without urgent community engagement, without sensitization campaigns to try and rebuild that capacity for coexistence in these new conflict zones, this situation is only going to get worse.
A critical need for bridging that gap between conservation efforts and local communities.
Absolutely crucial.
All right, let's shift now into our science section. We're moving from large animals down to the microscopic world. There's new research published in PNAS that highlights a really critical finding about arsenic buildup in rice. Arsenic is a known carcinogen, obviously dangerous, but this research says the risk isn't just determined by the amount of arsenic in the soil, but crucially, by the type of microbes living in the rice paddies.
Yes, this is a major insight because it completely reframes how we should think about the risk. The study identified what they call a crucial microbial seesaw, basically a balance. On one side, you have these arsenic methylating bacteria. These guys convert relatively less harmful inorganic arsenic, which is naturally present in many soils, into highly toxic organic forms, specifically compounds called DMA and DMMTA.
Methylating. So they add a methyl group, making it toxic.
Precisely. They transform it chemically. But on the other side of the seesaw, you have demethylating archaea, a different type of microbe, which actually reverses this process. They break down the toxic organic forms, essentially protecting the crop and reducing the risk.
So it's a battle between these two types of microbes. If the harmful methylating ones gain dominance, the risk skyrockets.
Exactly. And it's a double whammy. Firstly, the rice plant absorbs these toxic organic compounds, which poses obvious health risks to humans who eat the rice.
Right.
But secondly, for the plant itself, this toxic buildup induces a severe condition called straight head disease.
Straight head disease, what does that do?
It's a blight where the rice tillers, those are the stalks that bear the grain, they stay green and upright, but the kernels inside remain unfilled or shriveled. It essentially starves the plant's reproductive parts. It can lead to devastating yield losses, sometimes up to 70%.
70% yield loss. That's enormous.
It's huge. And the researchers found a kind of threshold. The risk, both to human health and plant yield, rises sharply when the ratio of these methylating bacteria to the protective demethylating archaea goes above 1.5.
And the analysis they did looking at Chinese paddies also identified a surprising age factor in this vulnerability, didn't it?
It did. That was quite unexpected. They found that soils younger than about 700 years were consistently dominated by those harmful methylating bacteria. That makes these newer, or perhaps recently converted, paddy fields highly vulnerable to arsenic toxicity.
And older soils.
Conversely, older legacy paddy soils, fields farmed for many centuries, tended to have much stronger, more established populations of the protective demethylating archaea. They seem to build up resilience over time.
So this has real implications for India, doesn't it, as the world's second largest rice producer?
It absolutely does. India needs to be very mindful of this. Any new paddy fields, or perhaps reclaimed land brought under rice cultivation in recent decades, might face a significantly greater inherent risk of arsenic toxicity, even if the total arsenic level in the soil isn't particularly high.
And we also have to connect this delicate microbial balance to the looming threat of climate change, I assume.
Absolutely, that's a critical link. Higher temperatures, altered flooding patterns, more extreme weather events, all the hallmarks of climate change, are expected to disrupt these soil microbial ecosystems. The concern is that these changes will likely tip the balance towards the harmful methylating varieties, potentially making the problem worse in many rice-growing regions.
Okay, so it's a complex problem. Does the research point towards any solutions? Mitigation strategies?
Fortunately, yes. It points to some clear agronomic interventions that farmers can use. One key strategy is draining the paddy fields mid-season. Allowing the soil to dry out reintroduces oxygen, which tends to suppress the activity of those anaerobic methylating microbes.
Ah, interrupts their cycle.
Exactly. Another promising approach is silicon fertilization. Adding silicon to the soil has been shown to reduce the uptake of arsenic by the rice plant itself.
Interesting. So this all raises a critical policy question then. If the real danger lies in the specific type of arsenic, these methylated forms like DMMTA, not just the overall quantity, shouldn't our food safety regulations change?
Logically, they must. Current standards, including the big international one, the UN's Codex Alimentarius, they primarily focus on monitoring inorganic arsenic levels in rice.
Which this research suggests isn't enough.
It suggests it's potentially inadequate. These findings really necessitate monitoring arsenic speciation. That means looking at the different chemical forms, including those toxic methylated species like DMMTA. This is crucial for ensuring genuine food safety, especially when you consider that rice provides nearly 40% of India's total caloric intake. The current standards might be missing a significant part of the risk profile.
A really important point for regulators to consider. Okay, sticking with food systems, let's look at something a bit different. The growing movement towards entomophagy that's eating insects. Now, insects already play countless crucial roles in ecosystems, pollination, pest control, decomposition, honey production, you name it. But eating them still faces resistance in many cultures, often due to simple neophobia, right? Fear of the new.
That's right. But the environmental and nutritional case for insects as food is becoming undeniable. They are a genuinely high-quality food source. Typically, insects are around 40% protein and maybe 20 to 30% fat by dry weight. That's very nutrient-dense.
Comparable to conventional meats.
In many cases, yes. And crucially, producing insect protein requires significantly fewer natural resources, much less land, far less water, and less feed compared to conventional livestock like cattle or pigs. The sustainability argument is very strong.
And while it might feel revolutionary or, frankly, a bit strange to some listeners, the sources point out that nearly a fourth of the world's population already consumes insects, often as, like, high-end delicacies. We found the mention of the Mexican Eskimo, which is apparently known as the caviar of the desert. That's the fried pupae and larvae of the velvety tree ant. And it's described as tasting like richly buttered baby corn.
Yeah, that description certainly helps overcome some of the ick factor, doesn't it? It sounds quite appealing.
It really does.
And it's important to remember that in India, this isn't some new weird trend. It's actually a long-standing traditional practice in many communities. The sources mention that over 100 different edible insect species are regularly consumed by various indigenous communities, particularly across the Northeast, but also in parts of Odisha and the Western Ghats.
100 species. That's quite diverse.
It is, and what's particularly interesting is that some communities have moved beyond simple foraging towards quite sophisticated forms of semi-domestication.
Semi-domestication. How does that work with insects?
We'll take the example given of the Chakasang and Angami tribes in Nagaland, who semi-domesticate the Asian giant hornet. They don't just randomly hunt for nests. They actively locate a wild nest, often high in a tree. Then they carefully transport it, the whole nest structure, to a specially prepared, deep-rearing pit dug in the ground near their homes. They then actually encourage the queen to enlarge the nest within this pit, creating a complex, multi-layered structure. Once it's reached a suitable size, they carefully harvest the high-protein larvae. This is much more like structured, sustainable resource management than simple hunting.
That's fascinating, a form of insect farming almost.
In a way, yes. And insects are used for more than just sustenance, too.
Like medicine.
Absolutely. The sources mention medicinal uses. For example, some tribal groups in the Animalai Hills reportedly stone-grind weaver ant nests the ants and their larvae into a spiced soup. This is consumed traditionally to alleviate things like respiratory problems and gastrointestinal ailments.
So a long history of varied uses. What's the broader outlook then? Will we all be eating insects soon?
Well, maybe not tomorrow, but the momentum is built. The World Health Organization, the WHO, is quite clear. They view insects as a key component of future sustainable food production systems globally. And we're already seeing processed forms like grasshopper or cricket flour becoming available as protein supplements, particularly in health food markets. It seems likely that insects, much like we've seen with millets recently, or maybe even lab-grown meats in the future, will gradually appear on more plates.
An interesting culinary future ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, let's turn now to our magazine section. We're focusing on design and experience, starting with the dramatic evolution of Indian airport architecture. India is now the third largest aviation market globally, which is huge. And the focus in new airport design seems to be moving beyond just pure functionality towards things like biophilic design, bringing nature indoor sustainability, and really enhancing the overall passenger experience.
Yeah, the new designs are really quite striking, and they often act as showcases, using architecture to tell a story or reflect local culture. Look at the upcoming Navi Mumbai International Airport. It's designed by Zaha Hadid Architects, a really big name. The design uses lotus-inspired geometry, a very powerful Indian cultural motif. It features these 12 huge sculptural columns that rise up like unfurling lotus petals.
Visually stunning, I imagine.
Absolutely. And inside, some of these hollow columns actually act as vertical light wells, drawing natural sunlight deep down into the terminal halls. So it's functional, too.
And this cultural element seems really strong in some of the regional airport designs as well.
Very much so. Take Guwahati's Terminal 2. It's been feted specifically for its cultural storytelling, drawing inspiration from Assam's role as the gateway to the Northeast. The design highlights the resilience of local bamboo, integrates traditional motifs like the Japi headgear and Gamokta textile patterns. It even includes a sky forest landscape feature.
Nice. And Bengaluru T2. That won an award, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. Bengaluru T2 won the prestigious Prix Versailles Award precisely for its success in bringing the garden indoors. It really emphasizes biophilia. It features this incredible 90-meter-wide forest belt that spans the concourses, and it achieves this using local materials like ivory brown granite and umber red bricks, plus features like bamboo bells hanging from the ceiling. It aims for a very calming, nature-infused atmosphere.
Okay, wait. Bengaluru T2 won an award for bringing the garden indoors. Is that purely about aesthetics, making it look nice? Or is there a functional benefit to this biophilic design?
Oh, it's definitely both. Biophilic design incorporating natural elements, light, and patterns is actually proven to reduce passenger stress and improve well-being. In a high-stress environment like an airport, that's a real functional benefit.
Makes sense. But while the aesthetics might be soaring in these new terminals, the sources also suggest that functionality still needs to catch up sometimes, especially when it comes to serving the diverse needs of all passengers. There are still some key pain points being reported.
That's true. The user experience isn't always perfect yet.
So what are passengers actually struggling with most, according to the feedback?
Well, different demographics highlight different critical needs. Parents traveling with young children, for instance, they consistently mention needing clean, sanitized strollers readily available right at the entrance, not having to hunt for them.
Right.
And better-equipped bathrooms are a must-clean facilities with proper, dedicated diaper-changing stations. Plus, small kiosks near gates selling essentials like diapers or baby food would be a huge help.
Okay. What about seniors or those with mobility issues?
For seniors, immediate wheelchair access right upon entry is crucial. They shouldn't have to wait or search, and navigation distances matter hugely. One traveler quoted, Usha Varma, specifically praised the comfortable size of Kochi Airport, contrasting it with the, quote, excessively long walk required at the award-winning Bangalore T2. So grand design needs to consider walking distances.
Good point. And for the road warriors, the frequent flyers who are constantly transferring between flights.
Streamlining international transfers is a massive issue for them, avoiding the immense frustration of having to exit the secure area, go through immigration and customs, and then re-enter security just to catch a connecting flight that's essential for a smooth journey.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly inefficient.
It is, and security lines themselves also need better management. It was specifically noted that often, for every, say, 10 security screening lines available, maybe only one is dedicated specifically for women. This creates unnecessary bottlenecks and delays, and really needs to be addressed for better flow. The ratio needs rebalancing.
So, looking ahead then, how are designers trying to future-proof these massive, complex structures? What are the trends?
Flexibility seems to be the key watchword. Using modular design principles is one approach. Think plug-and-play technology, where systems can be upgraded or changed without needing to rebuild the entire core structure every time technology advances.
Smart. And sustainability.
That's huge, too. The push towards designing net-zero terminal buildings, airports that generate as much energy as they consume, is becoming increasingly important. And intuitive wayfinding is critical in such large spaces. Using natural light cues, clear signage, maybe even smart flooring to guide passengers is part of the vision.
So what's the ultimate futuristic vision?
The sources paint a picture of airports evolving into almost sentient environments. Imagine terminals built with smart materials managed by AI systems that optimize passenger flow, energy use, and security in real time. The quote used is that the airport of the future might feel more like a living organism, part transport hub, part public square, part power plant. A truly integrated, responsive space.
That's quite a vision. From functional shed to living organism. Okay, that brings us beautifully and perhaps conceptually to our final topic today, literature and the nature of consciousness. Consciousness itself, as you know, remains one of science's most persistent enigmas. Science is brilliant at measuring objects, things out there, but consciousness is fundamentally subjective. It's that inner experience, the inner light, that resists objective description or measurement.
Exactly, and that's where art, particularly literature, often steps in where science struggles. The long sentence, as a literary technique, is arguably the writer's most successful attempt to give shape and form to the continuity of subjective awareness. Authors who master this style often seem to believe that consciousness simply refuses to stop at the period mark. The long sentence tries to mimic the mind's natural, flowing, often digressive, recursive, and associative impulses. It follows the way thought actually feels.
And different literary masters have used this sprawling sentence architecture for very different effects, haven't they? To map different kinds of inner worlds onto grammar.
Absolutely. You take Virginia Woolf in masterpieces like To the Lighthouse. For her, the sentence architecture becomes the narrative form of consciousness. She largely replaces traditional plot, cause, and effect with this fluid, rhythmic unfolding of perception and feeling. Punctuation, for Woolf, often feels less like a grammatical stop and more like just a place to take a breath within the flow.
Beautifully put. And then someone completely different, like William Faulkner.
Faulkner, yes. In books like The Sound and the Fury, he uses the long, looping, often torturous, self-intersecting sentence as a kind of heavy vessel. It carries the inescapable weight of memory, trauma, and guilt. His sentences often refuse to resolve easily, mirroring a mind trapped, circling its own pain and history.
A very different feel. And W.G. Sebald.
Sebald's prose, particularly in works like The Rings of Saturn, is often described as elegiac. His long sentences drift slowly, melancholically, moving from a closely observed object to a historical anecdote back to a personal reflection. They seem to capture the slow, inevitable erosion of meaning and memory over time.
And finally, Laszlo Krasznahorkai. His sentences are legendary for their length.
Oh, Krasznahorkai takes it to an extreme. His sentences, often built on endless conjunctions like and but, create this relentless, almost breathless, unstoppable flow. They seem to mirror a world descending into chaos, or perhaps just a profound sense of cosmic weariness and entropy. It's an overwhelming effect.
So, despite the age we live in, an age of tweets, sound bites, compressed communication, why does this style, the long sentence, still feel relevant? Why does it endure?
I I think it endures because it forces the reader's cognition to slow down. It compels you to match the tempo of genuine unfolding thought rather than just skimming information. It makes the act of reading itself a kind of physical experience of awareness unfolding in time. Ultimately, it serves as powerful proof, perhaps, that our subjective awareness is continuous, not neatly packaged into discrete units. It shows how consciousness gathers the entirety of the past within the experience of the present moment.
It seems the long sentence is maybe the most compelling argument literature makes against the tyranny of brevity. It demands that we actually pay attention to the intricate unfolding of the mind itself. Definitely something to ponder as you navigate the rest of your day.
Indeed. A lot to think about.
Thank you for listening. If you want to provide suggestions, please contact on the Twitter handle given in the episode description. As always, we are eager to hear what our listeners want to be informed about. We wish you a great day.